Nigeria Center for Disease Control confirms 125 new COVID-19 cases as federal government approves reopening of Nysc camps. Nigeria's capital inflow plunges to record low. In international news, China commemorates 75th anniversary of its victory over Japan in World War II. And in sport, Super Eagles to play Ivory Coast, Tunisia in friendly matches.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. 125 new coronavirus infections were confirmed in Nigeria on Thursday, raising the total number of infections to 54,588. Just as the country records fewer infections numbers, fatalities keep rising. 21 deaths were recorded on Thursday alone. 42 new cases of the virus were reported in Lagos State, followed by the Federal Capital Territory with 25, 14 in Katsina, Kaduna with 11, Kwara confirms 8, Ondo pens 7, while 4 cases were credited to Delta. Anambra, Oyo, Edo, Ogun, Osun, and Cross River states all recorded new infections as well. The federal government has received samples of Russia's COVID-19 vaccine. Kremlin's ambassador to Nigeria, Alexei Shebershin, delivered the samples to the Ministry of Health, Osage Ehanire, during a visit to the ministry in Abuja. The minister says the samples will be subjected to evaluation by the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, and the Nigeria Institute of Pharmaceutical Research. Russia had earlier announced the vaccine against COVID-19 last month. Russian President Vladimir Putin attested to the potency of the vaccine after being administered on his daughter, who tested positive to the virus. While some health experts say Russia skipped the third and most crucial stage of testing the drug before declaring it fit for human use, the country insists that it followed due health protocol. The federal government has approved the reopening of the National Youth Service Corps (NYSC) orientation camps across the country that were closed in March as part of measures to curb the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. National Coordinator of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Sani Aliyu, confirmed the Corps can start preparing to reopen orientation camps when education institutions reopen. Nigeria has gained victory in a suit to overturn a $10 billion judgment against it in a case involving process and industrial development. In the judgment delivered on Thursday, the Business and Property Courts of England and Wales granted Nigeria's application for an extension of time and relief from sanctions. This means the case will either go back to arbitration based on the new evidence, or both parties will now settle out of court. Cranston ruled that it has become necessary to consider a considerable amount of material to decide, first, whether, as Nigeria contended, there is a prima facie case of fraud, and how strong is that case. Secondly, the steps Nigeria took to investigate the alleged fraud from late 2015. 3 years ago, a tribunal had ordered Nigeria to pay P&ID $6.5 billion as damages, as well as pre- and post-judgment interest at 7%, bringing the total judgment amount to $10 billion. The federal government approached the court to establish that the contract was awarded on illegal terms and that officials paid bribes to get the contract. Nigeria's economy was shut down throughout April as part of measures to contain the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. This has caused some economic downturn as Nigeria attracted just $68 million in foreign portfolio investment inflow for the month, the lowest inflow recorded this year. Correspondent Deji Badmus has the details.
Worse, the oil-dependent nation has recorded since 2017.
Oil revenue constitutes about 90% of Nigeria's revenue. And so when there was a threat to that particular major revenue base, then it will also affect whatever perception, credit rating of the country. Investors and possible investors, potential investors, watch the credit rating of Nigeria at all times. Nigeria, for the period, started experiencing shortage of foreign currency, and so for investors, for businesses that wanted to repatriate their funds back to their country, it was the supply of such funds. The supply was not there, and it was difficult for them to repatriate. Investors watch this trend, and when they see that it's difficult for them to repatriate their funds, they are likely to reduce investment into that particular country.
Besides the plunge in global oil prices, the decline in capital inflow is also hobbled by the COVID-19 lockdown, which has led to economic activities grinding to a halt for months, coupled with rising inflation. Besides discouraging foreign investors, the local currency, the Naira, is weakening as forex earnings take a hit.
If the continuous decline we're having continues, automatically we'll get into recession by the end of this particular quarter. So it is going to impact negatively on us because the foreign investment that comes into Nigeria actually is a major source for it's another major source for our revenue base and another major source for our foreign exchange base.
Foreign direct investment and portfolio investment also fell by 30.65% and 91.06% respectively. Now the government has been reopening various sectors of the economy. It has also moved to fund the secondary forex market, measures which economic watchers hope could attract more inflows.
And that was Kelechi Emekalam.
Coming up, African stories. South Africa pushes ahead with COVID-19 corruption probe. And later, international news. China commemorates 75th anniversary of its victory over Japan in World War II.
You are watching AN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Accusing fingers have been pointed at officials of the South African ruling party, the ANC, and private companies as looters of funds allocated to help the country fight against the coronavirus pandemic. Authorities say corruption has taken center stage. The Auditor General has already unearthed major irregularities in corruption. An investigation ordered by President Cyril Ramaphosa is forging ahead. Correspondent Angelo Coppola has the details.
Once it became apparent that corruption and fraud was an issue, President Cyril Ramaphosa acted quickly and instructed the country's law enforcement agencies and the Auditor General's office to investigate.
A lot of the effort that we put into this on the detection side of things has revealed a number of frightening findings that require to be followed up very quickly, so that there is no significant passage of time before the required actions are implemented.
The scrutiny and detection work done by the AG's office, which highlighted risks and possible fraud, will now be sent to law enforcement agencies at the Fusion Center.
And we believe that those people have what it takes. They've got the skills, they've got the tools, and they've got the statutory mandate to take those matters that raised our level of suspicion as an audit office to a next level.
There has already been action taken against senior government officials. This as a report was released. The entire senior management team at the Unemployment Insurance Fund has been suspended. most sectors in society want to see rapid action taken against the alleged perpetrators.
We've seen very little consequence. We've yet to see anybody go to jail. We've seen very few of the stolen assets being returned. So that is, for us, is critical.
I think that has got to be properly done, because I suspect there are millions or hundreds of millions of rands that might be at stake. It's not quantified at all in the Auditor General report. But the second thing is, this is an ongoing project, and we've got over 800,000 people who have not been paid, some back to April.
While the first report was pretty damning, that second report, which is due in November, will probably provide more insight and more ammunition for those who are fighting corruption.
An alliance of rebel groups from Sudan's western region of Darfur and the southern states of South Kordofan and Blue Nile signed a peace agreement with the Sudanese government. This is designed to end 17 years of conflict. Now, South Sudan is calling for international support to the new peace deal with the Sudan. Correspondent Patrick Oyet has this story.
South Sudan has mediated a deal to end 17 years of conflict in Sudan's regions of Darfur, South Kordofan and Blue Nile.
The first thing is that we know Sudan. South Sudan and Sudan used to be one country. Even if we separated and now we are in two different countries, we are still neighbors. We know the root causes of the conflicts in Sudan. That knowledge of Sudan has helped us to mediate in the peace talks.
South Sudan is, however, struggling to implement its own peace deal reached after a civil war that began in 2013. Implementation of a 2018 peace agreement is slow, and that could lead to more violence, according to the African Union body monitoring the deal's progress. There are armed groups that are not part of the peace agreement and are still fighting the current government. Civil societies in South Sudan say Juba needs to do more.
South Sudan is fostering peace, and there is no peace in South Sudan. And for me, this is a moment that, again, we need to refer to South Sudanese leaders and ask them to have the political will, the commitment to be able to give concessions and compromises, necessary compromises, and realize peace for the people of South Sudan.
Sudan's peace deal also still faces some challenges. There are two groups who have opted out of the peace agreement. Their leaders are refusing their armies to be integrated into Sudan's armed forces, but the parties to the agreement say they are hopeful that the deal signed in Juba marks the end of war in Sudan.
This is a historical agreement that's meant to give us, the people of Sudan, a chance to build a new Sudan based on peace, equality and justice.
Previous peace deals fell through, and some analysts say the implementation of the current agreement could also be a challenge. South Sudan's government is urging support for Sudan's peace deal implementation from the international community, and so far the United Nations says it is behind the process. The Sudanese conflict was complex, with many opponents fighting each other and their main rival, the Khartoum government. However, many of the former warring parties now say that's behind them, and the deal is giving hope to many that it's possible to achieve lasting peace in the region.
French President Emmanuel Macron is due to meet with Ivory Coast leader Alassane Ouattara today, Friday, in Paris over Ouattara's re-election bid and his third-term agenda that has been described by opposition as unconstitutional. Ouattara had initially ruled out running for re-election, but then changed his mind. His decision to run for a third term in October's election has sparked tension and protest in the country. Macron has repeatedly said he wants to break from the past, in which France often seemed to call the shots in its former colonies, and said it was time for older generations to hand over to Africa's younger politicians. In March, Macron had welcomed 78-year-old Ouattara's initial decision not to run again, calling him a man of his word. Ouattara nominated Prime Minister Amadou Gon Coulibaly as the preferred successor, but Coulibaly later suddenly died. This led to the Ivory Coast leader's decision to contest in the poll. Macron and his government have yet to react publicly. Tensions have been mounting in recent weeks, with some clashes taking place between police and protesters since Ouattara announced his decision. A French diplomatic source says France's primary concern is that this election takes place impartially in a calm climate and with all the country's political forces.
When we return, international news. China commemorates 75th anniversary of its victory over Japan in World War II. And later, sport. Super Eagles played Ivory Coast, Tunisia in friendly matches.
You are watching ANN. Somewhere in the world, every second of the day, news is happening. And of course, Nigeria is bustling with news day and night. That is why ANN doesn't sleep. Our eyes are peeled, wide open, so no story escapes our radar. We stay abreast of world events and happenings at home. We keep you up to the minute in the world of sports. We give you information to stay on top of your investments and all the hard facts you need to navigate your day. If you miss us on air, you can keep up to date on our website and on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. We are ANN, African News Network. We do news right in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. September the 3rd marks the 75th anniversary of the victory of the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese forces during World War II. President Xi Jinping and Chinese senior officials presented flower baskets to martyrs and paid tributes at the Museum of the War of the Chinese People's Resistance against Japanese aggression in Beijing.
Flowers, wreaths, and tribute. This morning, Chinese President Xi Jinping and senior officials commemorated China's fallen heroes. At the Museum of the War of Chinese People's Resistance against Japanese aggression, veterans, family members of martyrs, and representatives from across the country gathered. The war against Japanese aggression lasted 14 years. It was an important part of the worldwide struggle against fascism. During the 14-year period, China lost over 35 million soldiers and civilians. The country's direct economic losses reached $100 billion at the 1937 exchange rate. Defending the country. This is what Yuan Xiangbing wrote down. The veteran has just turned 100. He said it's a strong spirit that kept him going.
We were determined to win and keep on advancing. There was nothing but a strong will. We were all very determined, and we were not afraid of sacrifice.
Japan formally surrendered in 1945. The victory came at a heavy price and earned China respect from the rest of the world. Today, Chinese commemorate the heroic sacrifices, and the message is, remember history, not hatred.
The number of persons infected by the coronavirus in India has jumped by another 83,000 and is near Brazil's total, the second highest in the world. India's total is now nearly 4 million cases. India's health ministry has reported more than 1,000 deaths, taking total fatalities past 68,000.
India reported a global record for daily coronavirus cases on Sunday, as the total number of infections across the world passed 25 million, according to a Reuters tally. India's 78,761 new cases in a single day surpassed the previous record, 77,299, set by the United States in mid-July. A sign of how the epicenter of the pandemic has shifted, with the Southern Asian country taking center stage from the US and Latin America. But despite the surging numbers, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been pushing for a return to normality to ease the economic pain of a lockdown imposed in March. On Saturday, his government announced that it will reopen underground train networks and allow sports and religious events in a limited capacity from next month. Dr. Rajiv Parakh, chairman of Peripheral Vascular and Endovascular Sciences at the Medanta Hospital in New Delhi, said once numbers had started going down, people thought they had won the war.
And everybody was out there without wearing a mask, without any social distancing, without any sanitizers, basically just gay abandon. Everybody thought that everything is over and we are back to square one. That is something that we should not have allowed to have happened.
Globally, the rate of daily new cases has slowed to around 1.2% over August, compared with 1.7% in July and 7.7% back in March. However, health experts stress that official data almost certainly underreports both infections and deaths, particularly in countries with limited testing capacity. While COVID-19's trajectory still falls far short of the 1918 Spanish flu, which infected an estimated 500 million people and killed at least 10% of patients, some experts worry the available data is underplaying the true impact of the pandemic.
Presidential elections buzz is now ringing across the United States as polls open in 60 days. Americans usually pay more attention to presidential polls around this time as elections near. The buzz this year is ringing loudly even outside the country. As correspondent Alistair Baverstock reports from Mexico, even Americans living there are paying attention.
San Miguel de Allende, home to one of Mexico's largest US expat communities. Most come here for retirement, indulging in the relaxed culture and lower prices south of the border. However, with a presidential election coming up in November, the community's thoughts are on the political situation back home.
I think it's important to all the Americans I know, and they primarily are Democrats. The ones I know are almost totally obsessed with getting Donald Trump out of office. There's no gathering that does not eventually devolve into a conversation about politics.
Indeed, around town, people seem to be talking about little else. The US government estimates more than 80,000 Americans living in Mexico are eligible to vote. And while voter turnout among expats is generally very low, less than 5% during 2018's midterms, community support organizations here in San Miguel de Allende say this group is highly motivated ahead of November's ballot.
One of our big roles is very nonpartisan, and we register everybody, and we help everybody.
Hope Bradbury is the chair of the San Miguel de Allende chapter of Democrats Abroad, leading a drive to help the community's absentee voters.
There are people that have not voted in decades that are coming to us to register to vote, and some that have never voted. They may have been having a really great time in Mexico and enjoying that, other life. And they've decided, okay, I need to step up. And I'm proud that people are doing that. That's what needs to happen.
Most votes here will be submitted via postal services, and with the ongoing controversy over mail-in voting in the US, the community is being extra careful to adhere to all the rules.
So we have to have people thinking proactively about how they're going to print their ballot, how if they need to scan it, if they are going to mail it. It's a process, and you have to make sure you call the election official in the states and make sure they actually got your form. It's not easy, it's complicated, and we are just telling people don't delay, don't delay.
As Mexico's expat community seeks to make its voice heard in the upcoming election, they're being told this proactive approach to clearing the hurdles of voting from outside the country is key.
Up next, sport. Super Eagles to play Ivory Coast, Tunisia in friendly matches. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In sport, Super Eagles of Nigeria have been scheduled to meet former African champions Cote d'Ivoire and Tunisia next month in friendly matches in Austria. Football federations of the three countries will bear all cost of staging the matches. Nigeria's last met Tunisia at the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations third-place match, where Odion Igalo's third-minute strike separated both teams at the Al Salam Stadium in Cairo. Naomi Osaka is still seeking an end to racial injustice as she stepped onto the Arthur Ashe Court wearing a mask featuring the name of Elijah McClain ahead of her U.S. Open second-round victory over Camila Giorgi. 23-year-old African-American man McClain died after being detained by police officers in Aurora, Colorado last year. Osaka had previously worn a mask honoring Breonna Taylor, a black woman killed by police officers who burst into her apartment in March. That is the ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatuji. Have a great weekend.